The alarm tore through the station before I even opened my eyes. I was still curled in my crate, half asleep, when the floor shook under me and the lights flickered red. My first thought was not fear, it was shame, because even now, even in danger, my body reacted too slowly, too weakly, just like it always had since the day I hatched. My name is Ash. I was the last egg to crack in my clutch, and the smallest. While my brothers and sisters came out with bright scales and strong wings, I came out dull and small, folded wrong, my flame barely a flicker instead of a roar. The moment the breeders scanned me, I watched their faces change. Disappointment is a language every creature understands, even a newborn one. Within a day, my siblings were claimed. Warrior houses wanted the strong ones. Scholar clans wanted the sharp-minded ones. I was left behind on a cold metal shelf in the hatchling exchange, watched by buyers who glanced at my numbers and walked away without a second look. I heard words like defective and waste of a slot more times than I heard my own name, because for a long time, I did not have one. That is where Eli found me. He was not a dragon buyer. He was a station mechanic, off-duty, wearing a jumpsuit stained with grease, walking through the exchange because it was a shortcut to the maintenance bay. He was not supposed to stop. Nobody like him ever stopped, but he did. I remember looking up at him, not cowering like the other hatchlings did when a stranger passed, because I had already learned that hiding never changed anyone's mind about me. He crouched down, elbows on his knees, and studied me the way he might study a broken engine part, not with disgust, but with curiosity. He asked the exchange handler what was wrong with me. The handler read off my weaknesses like a list of failures: underweight, weak flame, malformed wing joints, low projected strength. Eli listened to all of it without saying a word, and then he asked me my name. I did not have one. He said that was the first problem, and he would fix it right there. He called me Ash, because he said even a small flame leaves something behind. It was such a plain reason, so unlike the grand naming ceremonies my kind performed for strong hatchlings, but something about how simple it was made it feel more real than any ceremony could. The handler told him I would never fly true, that I was unsellable, practically a burden with a heartbeat. Eli just shrugged and said he had fixed worse things than me, and things that were never expected to work again. He signed the papers before the handler could talk him out of it, and just like that, without any ceremony at all, my entire future changed. I did not understand it then. Dragons are not simply taken home. We are claimed, ranked, displayed like trophies of potential. But Eli carried me out of that exchange the same way he might carry a spare part back to his workshop, tucked under one arm, already thinking about what needed fixing. The maintenance district where he lived was nothing like the polished halls of the dragon enclaves. It smelled like metal and oil, filled with the hum of machines and the clatter of tools. Humans moved around us with quick hands and quicker minds, solving problems with wires and welding torches instead of magic and muscle. At first, I thought I had been brought somewhere lesser. I did not yet understand that I had been brought somewhere honest. Eli did not train me the way dragonkin trained their hatchlings. There were no combat drills, no forced flame exercises meant to shame me into growing stronger overnight. Instead, he sat me down at his workbench and showed me how an engine worked, piece by piece, explaining why each part mattered, even the smallest ones. He taught me that a single loose bolt could bring down an entire transport ship, that even the tiniest gear had a purpose no larger part could replace. I began to realize something that no dragon had ever told me. Strength was not the only way to matter. Every day he adjusted something about me, not to hide my weaknesses, but to work with them. My wings were too weak to carry my body far, so he built a lightweight harness with small thrust assists, fitted carefully along my joints so it would not strain them. My flame was faint and unstable, so instead of forcing it to grow wild and dangerous, he helped me learn to control it, to make it precise instead of powerful. He said something I never forgot. He said fire that burns everything is common, but fire that can shape something delicate is rare. I grew slowly, but I grew differently than the dragons around me. While my siblings were becoming louder, more aggressive, chasing status through displays of raw power, I was becoming someone who understood how things worked, who could read a broken system the way others read a battlefield. Not everyone respected that change. A few seasons later, a delegation of dragonkin arrived at the station for a diplomatic visit, and among them was one of my own siblings, now grown into a celebrated young warrior with gleaming scales and a voice that echoed through the halls when he spoke. When he saw me standing beside Eli, small and plain, wearing a simple wing harness instead of ceremonial armor, his expression twisted into something between disbelief and disgust. He asked Eli, in front of everyone, why he had wasted his effort on a broken hatchling, instead of choosing one with actual potential. He called me an embarrassment to our kind, said I would never be anything more than scrap that learned to walk. I felt the old shame rise in my chest, the same shame I had felt on that cold shelf in the exchange. For a moment, I was that unclaimed hatchling again, waiting to be judged and found lacking. Eli did not raise his voice. He did not argue or defend me with grand words. He simply kept working on the panel in front of him, calm as ever, and said that status is not something you are given at birth. It is something you build piece by piece, the same way you build anything worth having. Then he looked at me and told me not to listen to noise that came from people who had never once tried to understand me. I held on to those words more than I held on to any insult my brother threw at me that day. Life continued at the station, and for a while it seemed like his mocking words would fade into memory, forgotten under the daily rhythm of learning and growing. But fate, it seemed, was not finished testing me yet. It happened during the very same diplomatic visit, only a few days later, when the station's main power distribution system began to fail. I remember the sound first, a low groaning hum that spread through the walls like something alive and struggling. Then came the warning lights, one after another, flashing across control panels throughout the station. The primary reactor coupling had cracked under pressure, and the automatic containment systems were failing to seal it in time. If it was not fixed quickly, the entire station risked losing power to its life support and hull integrity systems, a disaster that could put every soul aboard in danger. Engineers rushed through the corridors, shouting instructions, trying to reroute power manually while emergency drones scrambled toward the damaged section. The Dragonkin delegation, proud and powerful as they were, gathered near the control room, offering their strength in the only way they knew how. Several of the strongest warriors, including my own sibling, tried to force their way into the damaged coupling chamber, believing brute strength and fire could somehow melt the problem away. It did not work. The chamber was too narrow for a full-grown dragon to enter safely, its structure too fragile to withstand concentrated flame without collapsing entirely and making the leak worse. Every attempt at raw power only pushed the station closer to catastrophe. That is when Eli turned to me. He did not ask if I was ready. He simply said the coupling chamber was small enough for me to reach, and that my flame, unlike the others, could be controlled with enough precision to reseal the crack without destroying the surrounding structure. He trusted me with something that could decide the fate of everyone aboard, not because I was powerful, but because I had spent years learning exactly how to be precise. I remember the fear in that moment, sharper than anything I had felt standing on that exchange shelf years ago. But this time, the fear was different. It was not the fear of being judged unworthy. It was the fear of a task that mattered, one I actually had the ability to complete if I trusted what I had learned. I slipped into the narrow maintenance shaft leading to the coupling chamber, my small frame finally proving useful where larger, stronger bodies could not fit. The corridor was tight, filled with sparking wires and hissing steam, but I moved carefully, remembering every lesson Eli had ever taught me about reading a system under stress instead of reacting with panic. When I reached the cracked coupling, I saw the problem clearly. It was not something that needed brute force. It needed patience, and a flame steady enough to seal metal without melting through it entirely. I focused everything I had learned, calming my breathing the way Eli had taught me, letting my flame narrow into a thin, controlled line instead of an uncontrolled burst. It took several long minutes, each one feeling like an hour, but slowly, the crack began to seal. I adjusted my angle carefully, guided more by instinct built from years of studying mechanics than by raw magical talent. The warning lights around the chamber shifted from red to a steady amber, then finally to a calm green. When I emerged from the maintenance shaft, breathless and trembling from exhaustion, the corridor outside had filled with engineers and station crew, all watching in stunned silence. Even the proud Dragonkin delegation stood there quietly, their earlier attempts having failed completely, now witnessing something they clearly had not expected. My sibling stood among them, his earlier arrogance replaced by something unreadable. He did not apologize, dragons rarely do, but he did not mock me either. For the first time since we had hatched together, he looked at me the way one might look at someone they finally understood, rather than someone they had already judged and dismissed. I did not gloat. I did not need to. I simply told him, calmly, that I had never been broken. I had only ever been measured incorrectly, judged by a system that only knew how to value power and never bothered to look for anything else. Through the crowd, I saw Eli standing near the back, arms crossed, covered in the same grease stains as always. He was not celebrating loudly or boasting to anyone nearby about what he had helped create. He simply looked at me, and for the first time since I had known him, he smiled, not the polite smile he gave strangers, but a quiet, proud smile meant only for me. That smile meant more to me than every scan reading, every rank, every judgment the exchange handler had once placed on my small, weak body. In the days that followed, word of what happened spread through the station. Engineers spoke of the precision it took to seal that coupling without collapsing the chamber. Even members of the Dragonkin delegation, proud as they were, admitted that raw strength alone would have destroyed the very system they were trying to save. For the first time in my life, I was not spoken about as a failure, but as someone whose different way of thinking had solved a problem no one else could. I understood then what Eli had been trying to teach me from the very beginning. My kind valued strength because it was easy to measure, easy to display, easy to respect at a glance. But strength that only knew how to overpower things could not fix a system it did not understand. It could only ever destroy, never truly repair. Humans like Eli valued something different. They valued patience, precision, and the quiet stubbornness it took to keep trying even when something seemed impossible to fix. They did not measure worth by what you were born with, but by what you were willing to build, piece by piece, day after day, even when no one else believed it was worth the effort. I was not born strong. I was not born gifted with a roaring flame or powerful wings, but I was given something rarer than either of those things. I was given someone who looked past what I lacked and saw exactly what I could become if given the patience to grow into it. Looking back now, I understand that the weakest hatchling in the clutch was never truly weak at all. I was simply built for a different kind of strength, one that could not be measured on a scanner or judged in a single glance. It could only be proven through time, through effort, and through the quiet trust of someone willing to see potential where everyone else saw only flaws. I still carry the harness Eli built for me all those years ago, though it has been adjusted many times since then to match how much I have grown. I still work beside him in that same maintenance district, fixing broken systems that others believe are impossible to save, because I finally understand that being different from what is expected is not the same as being lesser. Every time I pass through the station now, I remember the cold shelf where I once sat, unclaimed and unwanted, and I remember the quiet mechanic who saw something in me that even I did not yet believe was there. He never needed to shout his belief in me. He only ever needed to show it, one small act of patience at a time, until I finally believed it myself. That belief became the flame that saved an entire station, not through raw power, but through precision, built from years of quiet care. And that, more than anything else, taught me the truth my own kind had never understood. Worth is never hatched fully formed. It is built, carefully, patiently, by those willing to see potential long before it ever has the chance to prove itself.